For the rest of the 80s, the IRA's ruthless campaign of violence would continue. On Remembrance Sunday in November 1987, a massive bomb killed 11 people and injured scores more during a service in Enniskillen in County Fermanagh.
Take advantage of those people assembling in that way was really a desecration. It was so cruel, so callous, that the people who did it can have nothing of human thoughtfulness or kindness or sensitivity at all. It was utterly barbaric.
Because the British were certainly not looking for a political resolution, you then have a military clash. And where there is a clash which is military on both sides, then both sides will think militarily. And therefore there was a battle going on between the IRA and the British Army and British government, which was vicious.
Many will remember, after the tragedy of Enniskillen, the Remembrance Day bombing, and I then arranged for her to come when the British Legion for the United Kingdom decided to show their solidarity with the members in Northern Ireland and the people at the Enniskillen parade by rephasing the parade and having it again 2 weeks later. And I said, I think to her, it would be a wonderful thing if you would come and join me at that parade. I remember the gasp that went up around that whole, I don't know if you were there at the time, that went right round that square when she stepped out of the car, and the admiration people had, because, you know, she was a marked person, and we had to keep her visit very secret. But the courage and her readiness to do it and the courage in carrying it out, I shall always remember that.
I had a brief conversation with her. She was very emotional, very, very emotional, and she obviously felt that it was a duty to be there. And I remember one remark she made when she said, you know, this is an opportunity to show that we will not be detracted from what we're trying to do, which is overcome this terrorism. And she said the silent witness of this service is very important.
There can be no compromise with terrorism. Treating with terrorists can only lead to more bombings, more violence, more people murdered. The best defense against terrorism is to make clear that you will never give in.
And not giving in meant that the Prime Minister would also ban anyone who would excuse or justify terrorist violence from the airwaves.
When you've had a bomb outrage, and there are pictures of bodies in distress and weeping relatives, and the next thing that happens on the screen, in people's living room, therefore, is somebody saying, well, you know, I support the arms struggle, or they deserved it. Whether it's loyalist or whether it's IRA, that I think is not only offensive, but it's wrong, and it's perfectly reasonable to remove that.
We're giving them the oxygen of publicity, and it did make it look more exciting and more attractive in some ways, and we felt that it was necessary to take that. Now, I mean, that was pretty much a temporary measure, and it, you know, it didn't endure.
It was a thing that really shook the people, because I don't think they thought that the governments would do it. But when they did do it, it showed a sort of muscle that they were going to have no nonsense.
I think it was a slightly defeatist thing to say they mustn't be heard lest people believe them. I think it would have been better to make sure that people didn't believe them.
For the rest of Margaret Thatcher's term in office, she would complain about a lack of security cooperation with Dublin. Charles Haughey was again Taoiseach, and particular low in relations came when the British refused to prosecute security forces personnel alleged to have been involved in so-called shoot-to-kill actions against IRA members.
What I have to say is that I find the response of the British government to the issues we've raised and the questions we've put totally unsatisfactory, and I would have to say that at this stage Anglo-Irish relations are at an impasse in regard to these issues.
Under Charles Haughey and Margaret Thatcher, Anglo-Irish relations would never get back on track. But the violence, both IRA and Loyalist, would continue. That included deaths in Gibraltar, in Northern Ireland, and of course Britain as well. Later, it would take new administrations in London and Dublin, and politicians in Northern Ireland, to build a new peace and political process.
I find it hard to say that she was actually a good Prime Minister with respect to Northern Ireland, I have to say. Partly because of her sheer lack of understanding of either of the two main traditions, partly because she was so driven by this feeling that there was something so awfully wrong with a part of the United Kingdom which was, as it were, not in profit and was dependent on the Treasury for subvention, and partly because I think that led to this irritability with the situation, and partly because also I think she was subject to delusions, carefully cultivated by others, about breakthroughs in security policy, which were never going to happen.
I suspect that she probably didn't understand Ireland, North or South, or Irish people really. I think that she had that kind of Tory attitude to us Irish.
At that time, I think determination was needed, and the people gathered strength from that. Like all politicians, she had her own agenda, and I think it depends what you think is good for Northern Ireland. I personally believe she was the right person at the right time.
I think I can imagine other potential Prime Ministers, past and future, who would not have had the grit and the courage to stand as firm.
People, I think, in Northern Ireland knew that she was actually on the side of the United Kingdom, of people's right not to be coerced by terrorism and to support them in their fights against them. And in that respect, she was very robust, and that was, I think, a tremendous credit to her at that time. And I say, as Secretary of State, I couldn't have asked for better support.
She helped Sinn Féin to grow by refusing to move on the hunger strikes, or being seen to refuse to move, which was how it appeared, certainly at the time. But she also furthered British-Irish cooperation, and in so doing led the groundwork for the peace process to a large degree.
Tremendous stamina, tremendous intellect, but she hadn't the most important thing that any politician must have, and that is concern for human beings, which ultimately is the essence of politics.
She is still a hate figure within Republicans and Nationalists, and that's a hard thing to say, you know, because she's gone, but there'll be no good memories from Nationalists or Republicans about Margaret Thatcher.
I think she would see her legacy as standing firm against terrorism. So I think that's what she would see it as. I think she tentatively made attempts to resolve it, but in the end, the terrorism, the violence, the bombing, that got in the way of that. And in the end, I think she saw herself as a resolute Prime Minister who would stand firm, as it were, for the realm, defence of the realm against terrorism. So in a way, I think that's how she would see herself. Somebody who paid a huge personal price in the loss of colleagues and friends, but in the end, she stood firm.